Thanks so much, everyone, for being here with us today at the McMichael. I'm Sarah Milroy. I'm the executive director here, and I have the very happy task of introducing today's talk with Emily Henderson and Paul Seesequasis. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. The McMichael Canadian Art Collection is located on the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the original lands of the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat people. It is uniquely situated along the Carrying Place Trail, which historically provided an integral connection for Indigenous people between Ontario's Lakeshore and the Lake Simcoe Georgian Bay region. And the Carrying Place Trail is at the bottom of this bluff here, where the Humber River runs. And it is a at least 5,000-year-old trading route. There was a village about a 4-minute drive from here, just north, where Rutherford crosses the 400, that had 3,000 Wendat people living there just 500 years ago. So this land is really alive with memory, and this room installed with the works of Norval Morrisseau and Daphne Ojig is where we gather. And we gather also in the presence of Mother Nature out the window. We have this unique situation at the McMichael of being able to be embedded in landscape, and it informs a lot of what we do here. Certainly is a very strong part of People of the Watershed, the photographs of John Macfie, which is the exhibition that we're all going to hear about today, and then go and see just down the ramps here to my left. I want to start with a few thank yous. This is a partnership with the Contact Photography Festival, who do so much to promote the work that so many people do in the realm of photography all over the city in different institutions. They're a great organization, and we are happy to work with them always. This was also done with the assistance of the Archives of Ontario, and I understand that John is in the audience here somewhere from Archives. All of these wonderful photographs of John Macfie's were given by the family or by Macfie himself to the Archives of Ontario, and they have been a collaborator, because they have just done everything they can to make everything accessible and easy for us here at the McMichael to bring this archive to light, and we're so grateful for that. The publication sponsors, Bryce and Nikki Douglas, which some people in this room might know, this wonderful couple, helped to fund the publication, which includes a beautiful piece by Paul Seesequasis, our curator, but also a robust display of all the photographs that are in the show, and very importantly, a language dictionary that John Macfie made in the field, which is a phonetic language dictionary of the Indigenous languages that he was hearing and their translations in English, which is a sort of a perfect cultural snapshot of 1952 to 1962, and a priceless thing that was held. You'll find it in the exhibition downstairs, but that was held by the Archives of Ontario. The show has been generously supported by Dragonfly Ventures, and we have a number of them here today with us, a number of our favorite dragonflies. Doug and Ruth Grant, the wonderful Roz and Andy Heintzman, close parts of our community here at McMichael, the KM Hunter Charitable Foundation, and Sarah Hunter, I think, is attending with us today. Thank you for your support. And Denny and Dara Starrett, who I think are also here, who I have not seen today, but I've been flying around in circles, so please forgive me if we haven't said hello yet. Our media partner is the Globe and Mail, as always, my alma mater. So the real stars of the day, though, of course, the Macfie family is here with us today, and there are many strong over here in the front to my right, led by the indomitable Joan Macfie, the widow of John Macfie, who is 94, and I said to her, we just met a few moments ago, and I said, you must be a very brave woman to marry such an intrepid soul, because Macfie was a real rambler and obviously had an enormous desire to explore and be always, heading out and learning new things, and his work that he did with the government and natural resources. So, bless you for your temperate spirit to hold all that together so we can enjoy this body of work today and your beautiful family. You're here. So I want to just quickly note also Paul Jarankich, who did all the color fixing on the images and for the publications, here with us today, and the marvelous Gilbert Lee, our book designer, is also attending, so thank you to them. And then on the stage, two very special people. I want to just highlight and commend my wonderful new colleague, Emily Henderson, who is the newly appointed Associate Curator of Indigenous Art here at the McMichael, who is already making enormous changes with us inside the Curatorial Department and will be spearheading a major project that we're doing next year on Cape Dorset on our archive of 90,000, I think it's keeping her up at night quite a bit, 90,000 original drawings from Cape Dorset that we have held here for the community of King 8, as it's now called, or was then called, and then not called, and now called again, King 8, Cape Dorset. She is making a speedy, breathtaking review of this archive, and then she will be, please all come back to see it, she will be making an exhibition that uses the archive as a way of telling the story of the progression from pre-contact times and life on the land through to life in the 21st century. So an ingenious way to mine the archive, and we're so glad to have you with us, Emily, and to be able to support you in your wonderful work. And Paul Seesequasis, who is the curator of People of the Watershed. I was a distant admirer of Paul's for quite a while before I finally met you over the phone. But he created a beautiful book a number of years ago, I guess 2019, called Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun. It's actually also available in our bookshop, I will point out, but fine bookstores everywhere. But this was a compendium of photographs taken in Indigenous communities all across various different Indigenous communities in this kind of mid-20th century period. Some of the photographers were settler photographers and some were Indigenous photographers. But what it gave was a real living portrait of these marvelous and resilient, intact communities and their way of life, values, family systems, cultural beliefs, and so on in this very lively and affirming document of this book. And I admired it so much, and I think I bought a huge pile of them and gave them to everyone for Christmas. And then it kind of lay dormant in my mind, and then I thought, you know what, Paul really should be doing something at the McMichael. He's just such a brilliant person to shape content and think about it in new ways. So we reached out and I said, do you have any itches that you'd like to scratch? Because we would like to be there to support your work. And he said, well, there's this photographer, John Macfie. He was a settler guy. He was a trap manager all across the Hudson Bay Watershed. He took photographs. You know, he was in Blanket Toss, but I feel like there's a much deeper dive there. And we said, let's do it. So it's just been a total joy, Paul, working with you. You're so thoughtful and such a lovely colleague. All of us at the McMichael feel so blessed. And we feel so honored to be bringing forward this archive of photographs to the general public. And this show, my colleague Jennifer Withrow has been furiously out there spreading the pollen about this exhibition. It's going to be going to Kenora, to Timiskaming, and other northern places, mostly in Ontario. And what the beauty of it is, because these are printed from negatives and we made them, we can allow this show to travel in smaller communities that don't have Class A facilities. We can put it into community centers and other kind of friendship centers across the north and get these images back where they can actually perform their beautiful medicine. So thank you, Jen, for all that hard work that you do. And thank you for not crying too much. And thank you, too, for the conversation we're about to listen to. It's great to have you together on the stage and to have all of you here with us today at the McMichael. Thank you.
All right. Is this working? Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. As we said, I've had the distinct pleasure of being able to work with Paul over email and over Zoom for the past couple of months, and now for the past week, the distinct pleasure of being able to work with you in person and carpool with you and be with you on site. And as we've been enjoying this process, I've gotten to learn a little bit about you. I've been a longtime follower of you, of course. I'm going to quote Jesse Wente from this week's book launch at Queen Books, where he said, if you're not following Paul on Instagram, what are you even doing? So I would just like to maybe start by getting to know a little bit about you, how you come to this kind of work, and how you discovered John's work and this project got rolling for you.
Certainly, Emily. And just before I start, it's great to see you all here. I'm especially touched to see the family here, and that means a lot to me. it was about a year ago that I was up in Parry Sound after Sarah Milroy had kindly said thumbs up to this idea of this exhibition. The first stage was research. So I was coming up to Parry Sound and meeting with the family who were very supportive, put me up there, fed me, and had a chance to see John Macfie's studio. So that's kind of what I do. I deal with Indigenous archival photography. I've always been into photography. I'm not a photographer. I am a photographer, but I'm not a photographer who has the ambition to become, on exhibitions, but I admire other photographers. And doing this Indigenous Archival Photo Project, which is kind of an online project. And what it was about was, my mother was a residential school survivor in Saskatchewan, which is where I'm from. I'm Plains Cree background on my mother's side. On my father's side, a little bit of, his father had come from Galicia, which no longer exists, but is just south of Poland. It's part of Ukraine now. And my background on that, on European side, is probably Ukrainian and Scandinavian. I'm one of those rare people who has Vikings disease, which is inherited. So obviously, somewhere back there, I had a helmet on my head and was going on these ships, probably to North America as well. So that's my family background, Saskatchewan, and I've always had this interest in photography, Emily. And I just mentioned my mom, who went to a residential school in Saskatchewan at St. Michael's Residential School. And why I mention that is at the time the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was happening, and we were hearing a lot about residential schools, and a lot of the awful things we know happened there. But I also was talking with my mom and some of my aunties and uncles and their experiences at the residential school they went to, which wasn't always great. But my mom came out of there and was in that first generation of Indigenous nurses in Saskatchewan. In fact, when I go back next week, they're honoring her. That would have been 50, around the time of these photos, 52, 50, she graduated 54 in nursing school. And what she framed me in her memory and what many people from my family did was a different picture that wasn't just tragic, and it was about community, it was about language, it was about culture, it was about hard times but good times. And I kind of wanted to find archival imagery that kind of reframed the Indigenous experience, so it wasn't just sad or dark, but it had life and vibrancy and humor, and because we know that's almost a pan, if I can, Indigenous thing, the sense of humor and that sense of enjoying life. And lo and behold, one of the photographers I happened to come across was John Macfie, purely by chance. I was going through the archives of Ontario, and I started to see these photographs from northwestern Ontario, particularly in the period I was interested in, my mom's period, when my mom would have been in her late teens, early 20s. And here is these beautiful photographs, black and white, but also this, get into it later, this 35 millimeter Kodachrome slides, which the colors just kind of, you'll see when you actually see the prints, how beautiful they look. And these, this is kind of a little bit washed out because it's on a projector, but they were just gorgeous photos and a different time. This is Neskatanga. It's a women's camp. They're doing, it's a moss camp where they're gathering moss, which had many uses. And then the water behind was, you could drink out of the water in those days. So it was this time, and who took these photographs? And that led me to the Macfie family and John Macfie. In Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun, he was a chapter in there, but I felt that wasn't enough. And John, I was fortunate when I found John Macfie's name that John was around. He was active on Facebook. I kind of reluctantly sent him a message, hi, John, you don't know me. And he was very friendly and open, and that just led us to where we are now. And so that's kind of what I do as an archivist and as a writer and journalist.
Yeah, and I know that some of the information you've got, a lot of what's great is that many of these people are named and we know who they are. We know a lot of their stories. So was that coming to you in your conversations with John Macfie, or from his diaries, or from a little bit of combination of both? Like, even if you go downstairs, when you see there's vinyls up on the wall that are actually images of the negative slides that these images come from, and they do have John's handwritten notes on them as well. Yeah.
They certainly do, Emily. And that was one of the challenges in blanket toss, was to find photographers who were still around. I was looking at other photographers, Richard Harrington, Rosemary, Gillette Eaton, etc. But they've all passed on. And so I was looking for photographers who were still around and who still had their memory and their mind sharp, because a couple of them, had dementia or other things. And John was as sharp as nails when I spoke with him. He could recollect, trips, people he met. He could tell their stories like they were yesterday. And that's what John Macfie was. I came into John Macfie as a photographer, knowing him as a photographer. And it was only later that I found out in Parry Sound that he's actually, people know him as a columnist, as a journalist, as a writer. And I started to meet people who didn't really know that John Macfie had taken this body of photography, which I think is one of the most impressive, over the course of a whole decade, one of the most impressive collections of photography that thankfully he had the foresight to contribute to the Archives of Ontario, which allowed me to, quote unquote, discover him.
Yeah. And so this title, People of the Watershed, it's of course very much tied to this space geographically. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this very special place near the Hudson's Bay and the people that live there and who we're seeing?
Yes, be happy to. When you go to see the exhibit, when you come in, when you look to your left, we've kind of taken an original map that was in John Macfie's book, Hudson Bay Watershed, which inspired the title of this exhibition, People of the Watershed. I wanted to hold as true to sort of John's writing and John's photography as I could, and not be I didn't want to be imposing my own vision too much. I wanted the photography to stand on its own. That was important to me. So we called it People of the Watershed. And we took a map that was from John's book, and it just shows the expanse of the territory we're talking about. It's the whole Hudson's Bay watershed, going from, I think the most southern photos in the exhibition are from Mattagami. It goes up to Severn River, which is way up near the Manitoba border in the northwest, and all the way over to the northeastern part, which is Moose Factory, Moose Knee, that whole area around James Bay. And up to, right up to the coast of Hudson's Bay. This was the territory John was taking these photographs in. And this is the 1950s and 60s. So what you're going to see is a lot of dog teams, wintertime travel, and John would have to go out on the land. You'll see you'll see faces there that'll repeat themselves. A Cree guide called Philip Swampy Matthew was kind of one of John's key people there, and he appears in a lot of the images. In the summertime, it's canoes, so there's a lot of canoe by waterways, and this is pre-snowmobile, pre-television. So I'm glad that Sarah mentioned John's kind of glossary of native terms and English terms, because that would have been John's job. As he was a trapline manager, so he had to make himself understood to people, but he also had to understand what they were saying back to him, right? Or have some understanding. So he had this dictionary. He was doing all this at this time, because at this time, this is pre-television. Radio was around, but it's pre-television, no GPS. So if you had an accident up in the bush somewhere, you have to know how to survive. You're on your own. You can't pick up your cell phone and hit SOS. There was nothing. So that period of time, and because it's pre-television, pre-internet, the languages were very strong. We're talking about three main tribal entities: the Anishinaabe, or the Ojibwe at the time, the Cree, which we can still call the Cree, and the Anisininew, which at the time were the OG Cree. And the OG Cree are interesting. You did the translation for it. It's kind of a mix. It's an interesting language. It's a mix between Cree and Ojibwe together. And they kind of viewed themselves as the original people, and the Cree and Ojibwe where we kind of migrated away from them. But so it's this period of time that John Macfie was up there, and it's such a important period of time. And I think what John did also, which is one thing we've talked about, is he was interested in people. He's interested in day-to-day life. He wasn't an outside gaze trying to romanticize a different culture. And I think his connection with people is really what comes through with this exhibition.
Yeah, that's something you brought up a couple of times. I like the way you described him as like a people's photographer. You can see that from the way he's, right here we have him, offering tobacco.
There's Philip.
These beautiful photos where he has long-standing, deep relationships with people. Nobody's being posed in front of him. Like, for example, you've brought up examples like Curtis, where it's for an outside gaze. It's to capture a moment. It's to capture an idea. Where he's very much in the life. These are photos you only get when people are comfortable with you and they trust you. And you can get these really candid moments from day-to-day life that you wouldn't get coming in. Hello.
Hello. This is great. It's like when this show gets north, if it does get north and it gets north, there's going to be Native kids running all around this stage. So that's a good, from the Macfie family, that's a good introduction.
That's a good sign.
Please go ahead, Emily.
Oh, but I was just saying that you've spoken very much to, he's capturing, here's Philip, who you were, this would have been the guide, and so this is someone he had a long-standing relationship with and appears not only multiple times, but over different communities. Why
One
is
of
that?
John's main dudes.
Yes. You want to maybe talk about this relationship a little bit?
Going out on the land, and John was a trapline manager, so he was responsible for this huge area of territory. So he would have to rely on people to take him from point A to point B. And these people would have to know the waterways or the dog trailways, all these things. So these were really his lifeline, people like Philip Matthew, who would ensure that he gets from point A to point B alive. Not lost in the woods somewhere, etc. So people like Philip were key people. And I imagine just through discussions between Philip and John, I'm sure John being a journalist, I'm sure was just soaking up everything that Philip said, because John Macfie was first and foremost a journalist, though I'm thinking of his photography, he was also a journalist. So people like Philip Matthew were key people enabling John to get around and do this kind of work. Philip was also interesting because there was another side to him. And you'll see photos in the exhibition, he was a fiddler. And he would travel, in John's book, he talks about Philip traveling, over 100 kilometers to go from one dance to another dance in the wintertime, fiddling. And there's a neat connection there because, of course, John Macfie, Scottish background. So when you see the exhibition, not only is the music isn't powwow music, it's not drum, it's fiddle and it's guitar and it's square dancing, it's line dancing, it's jigging, it's reels. There's, because the connection, the Scottish Native connection goes back, as you know, we're talking early 1600s in this part of the country. So it's like it wasn't new. This is embedded, not just in the music, but also in the fashion. And you'll see the Hudson's Bay stores, the women have different plaids depending on which community they're in, because the stores would be stocking different types of material. And of course, the beadwork. The beads were a major trading thing as well.
Yeah. And then we've got this kind of very iconic photo now, and this has also inspired other work.
Yes.
If you want to maybe talk a little bit about, I think it's even included in the book.
Yeah, this is in the book as well. It's outside, maybe we could just go back to it. It's two boys there's actually a series of photos that John Macfie took. John was a trapline manager, he's up in the community, so he was not a reporter investigating residential schools, or that wasn't his, what he was out there for, and it wasn't his focus at all. But he just happened to be there when these students from the Pelican Falls Indian Residential School were watching this man trout fishing by the river just outside of Sioux Lookout. And they're in their residential gear that the boys would be wearing. The schools were segregated, of course, boys and girls were in separate schools. And these boys were watching this man trout fishing, and John just took these evocative photos. And they could have been from anywhere in that region around Sioux Lookout, because that's it. The students would come in from all over. The Pelican Falls Indian Residential School, of course, is no longer there, but there is the Anishinaabe Nation now runs the high school there, which is now controlled by the Anishinaabe, but it's still a school. The school is there. It's evolved into this. But John was there that day, and he took these photos. And after Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun came out, Anishinaabe artist Rebecca Belmore, who you may know her work is certainly in here. You see it when you walk in.
Listening to the land, those big, I think they're downstairs. Those, like, by the window, there's those sort of big, I don't know how to describe those big conical shapes with the trumpet shape with the landscape on it. You can go check that out later, but yeah.
So what happened? Thank you for that. What happened was that Rebecca Belmore contacted me, sent me an email. This guy, John Macfie, is he still alive? Because I saw those Pelican Falls Indian Residential School photos of the boys. There were some black and white photos as well that John took. And I'd really like to do an art piece on that. And I said, yeah, John's still alive. I can put you in touch. So Rebecca got in touch with John Macfie, I think via Facebook at first, and then they exchanged emails. Rebecca Belmore, along with a couple of other collaborators, built this beautiful installation piece that uses part of John Macfie's photos. But then, and this is how this connection that's still there and how small the world is, John said, do you know, I can't remember the first name, but it was a Belmore. And Rebecca said, that's my dad. And he was one, and John said, he was one of the guides who took me around. So this, this whole circle kind of, they hit it off then, and this whole circle kind of came around as it was meant to be. And it just showed how connected and how well-known John was, not just in the towns, but also within the Native communities themselves.
Yeah. And then too, with these children, you also speak a lot and write a lot, and you'll notice very much in these images, there is this sense of, you talk a lot about the wholeness of communities and children. There's so many images, and this would have been the peak of the residential school era, so many images of children at home with their families. You see kids, like this image from Treaty Time here, if you want to talk about those observations you made in the work.
It's interesting, and it's maybe an unanswered question. I don't have the answer as to how. It could be just the timing, because the students would generally come home, at least out west, how it worked was the students would come out of residential school only at Christmas time or after graduation in June. Then they'd be with family until the fall and then back into, because it was a residential school. It wasn't just a day school. But in John Macfie's photos, you'll see children there in the winter, you'll see them in the spring, fall. So it's interesting, it's a little mystery, like, did these children not go to residential school because the communities were that remote, and or did John just happened to be there at the time when they were on their summer break or just over Christmas? But it seems that the winter photos in particular, it seems like that's too small a time frame of a window for John to have taken all these photos. Yeah. So it's one of those things I don't quite have an answer for, but it's a puzzler for me.
Yeah, that one image we have, who's the guide, Matthew? Swampy.
Yeah.
So we have that image of him with the fiddle on his arm, where he always held it low on the arm, but you noticed he was in front of a chalkboard. You can see that down in the exhibition. And there's school lessons happening on the chalkboard. So there must have been some kind of local schools or day schools happening in the community at that time. Exactly, and that's one of the things that I think it would take someone to do some research, and which is not I'm not that kind of researcher. But at some point, I'm sure if someone did some research, they could provide those answers. Yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit about some of these photos here. You're talking about color and Kodachrome and these colored images, and about how.
If we can go back to that one.
Oh,
that'd be
yeah,
great.
for
Just
sure.
hold it
We can
there, yeah.
discuss this for a little
Yeah.
bit about how I love this photo of these women here. If you want to talk about color, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. I don't know if people can read the caption. Is there someone here who's Ojibwe? That's the surname, Shukakweb? I'm not sure. I always mispronounce it. But these two women are from that family. One, Matilda, is a midwife. She's the younger one that you see with the big smile there. And the elder lady is a medicine woman. A medicine woman would be, as a general term, she'd be the woman who knows what plants to use if you're sick, if you have a fever, if you're vomiting, or whatever ailment you have. She would know the herbal, plants that would be in the area to heal you. And generally, because nurses only came through at this time once in a month or whatever, and the nearest hospital was a air flight away.
Out.
Yeah, that local knowledge, being a medicine person was a really important role. It wasn't just someone you'd go see to learn something about while you're doing research. These were key people in the community. So she was a medicine woman. But in terms of what I like about this, in terms of the photo itself, as you were asking, Emily, is just the joy in it. When you walked in here, you may have seen a polka dot tent, a canvas polka dot tent. That's almost identical to the tents that are in John Macfie's photographs, except this one's been fancied
We've
up.
got it a little fancied up, yeah, a bit fanciful.
I don't know if they had many polka dot tents up there at that time, but just the joy, you can see them picking out the tent. This is probably at treaty time or something. Neskatanga, so it's up north.
And there's still birch bark on that one tent pole.
Oh yeah, you can see how
really
fresh,
lovely.
the birch bark is still there. It hasn't peeled off yet. You can see the little, it's the other thing when you look at these John Macfie's photos is this detail. When you walk through it, and there's one photo, I don't think it's on here, but of this man standing looking at it. It's a forest fire photo, so there's a float plane and there's a man in overalls. We just see him from the back. He's looking across the lake, and obviously they're watching with concern the forest fire in the distance. But he's got this really elaborate beaded belt around his overalls. Anyone who wears overalls knows you don't need a belt. So this is just accessories and bling that people are wearing, even if only 4 or 5 people are going to see you. So it's just these neat little fashion touches, the kerchiefs, all these little attentions to detail. It looks like the woman almost has a cravat on or something, I'm not sure, but it's this life and these attentions to detail that I think gave John Macfie a special touch as a photographer.
Sorry, we got a bit frozen on the slideshow.
Oh, there we go. And that's in the summertime, so this is traveling in the summer. So you can see it's not just, John wasn't just leaning back on a pillow while guides were taking him around. He was part of the team. Mm-hmm. He's obviously was in the first canoe right here. If we could just go back one sec, taking these photos. So this is the other thing is, you can picture John with his camera, maybe balancing through the rapids, taking these photographs. And it's really this kind of on-the-spot journalism, which I love about it, especially out in the bush.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go ahead on the next one.
No, because we've got this photo now here that you're talking about with this is actually blown up as a vinyl downstairs. And this is, I think, maybe one of my favorite images in the show. I love the composition. I love the yellow of the float plane. And then, of course, I don't know if you can see it, especially if you're far back of the room, but there will be an opportunity in the show to get up quite close to this because we've got it blown up large. That beaded belt that says Canada on it.
Yeah, it does say Canada over on the right side, and it's totally unnecessary, so it's strictly fashion.
Yeah, and then you have things organized as well, the way you've set things up in the spaces by season. So what led you to making that curatorial decision?
It just seemed to fit, I think, with this collection of photography. Firstly, season would be how anyone who's ever lived in the North especially, well, pretty much anywhere, the seasons are, it's different than living in Toronto. The seasons mean so much more. Spring and fall, and obviously summer and winter, they're entirely different seasons. And it just seemed like this is the way to set up, curate John Macfie's photography. rather than going a chronological, 1951, 1952. That just seemed too linear. And it didn't seem like it would do credit to John's travels, hopscotching here and there and back and forth. And also the change of the season and how that determined how people lived and what they were doing. So that was also the other side of it. It just felt more natural, more holistic, more in keeping with the period of time and these photographs themselves. Oh, can we stop here for a second?
Yeah, I thought you might want to talk about this one.
Yeah, I want to talk again about fashion. When you go into the show, you'll see we kindly have some items that were taken from John's study that the McPhee family has kindly allowed us to display here at the McMichael. And thank you for that. And you'll see these beaded moccasins that John had collected with beautiful beadwork. And then you see these plain moccasins, which one was a pair that were made especially for John, which there's no beading, they're caribou or moose, they're heavily stitched, and they're for trudging across the tundra or the snow. They're work boots, it's essentially work shoes. And so this, just that they were basic utilitarian, is that the word? Utilitarian, whatever it is, shoes. But then, you start to, okay, people didn't wear their fancy bead stuff when they went out and do stuff or go hunting. And then you come across guys like Martin Eva, and he's got this beautiful beaded coat that obviously someone loved him, who spent many, many hours beading this with the fringes, the matching gloves that he's wearing. He's got little tassels on his moccasins and on the snowshoes. He's off to hunt ptarmigan. And, this seems like, why are you dressed up this way if you're just going hunting? So obviously that breaks the rule that fashion and how people appeared was, was very much a personal statement. And obviously Martin's personal statement was to get all blinged up to go hunting. And
yeah, and I love
that's cool.
Yeah, there is such an Indigenous fashion movement right now where, you can purchase beadwork now, but back in this time, to have something set up like this is a family member or a wife or a grandma or an auntie, someone that's putting their own time and effort and energy into making this. And it actually plays well into the next slide here, which is such an example of, first of all, this is another deep in the midwinter something to do, but another example of these tartans you're talking about that are being traded through at the store, the Hudson's Bay Company.
Yeah, exactly. From the cradle board, the Tikanagan, the moss bag you'll see is kind of a orange, yellow tartan, to the one the auntie's holding. It looks, I think, the auntie's holding a small infant there. All the women have their kind of kerchiefs on. It's just so north, anytime, even today, I don't know if they do that in Greenland, but at least in northern Canada, people are you'll still see old timers wearing kerchiefs and stuff.
Oh, young people too, right? Like it's a fashion statement now. You tie it on your purse, or people wear it on their heads. Yeah, I call them kokum scarf or scarf, granny scarf. It's still it's made a comeback or a come around, and you see it across the prairies and across the north. It's still very much a part of the culture.
That's really, if I can on that, that's really a good point. And who knows, a year after this, because of John Macfie's photography being seen, we might see tons of people walking around with tartan on and tartan skirt. So if you see that on the streets of Toronto, you can say you were there when that fashion began.
Well, even something...
or rebirthed.
Yeah. I wonder if this is from that same evening that we have here.
Oh, that's interesting.
This is looking like maybe the same schoolhouse or the same room.
Yeah, and just on Emily's point earlier, can we go back to that, Emily? This is Philip Matthew again, and you can see he has his own distinctive style of play, playing the fiddle. But this is the blackboard that Emily was talking about, and this is up in Fort Severn. Fort Severn is way up. When you see the map at the exhibition, it's just by the furthest north, right by the Manitoba border. It was one of the most traditional communities. The Medewan Lodge was still strong there, and you'll see photos of John being invited to a Medewan ceremony, and that's not something that you just walk into. You're invited to those. And you need to. There's protocol, and you need to be. Obviously, you're respected if you're invited to do that and to take photographs. And John was Well, John's in the photo, so someone was taking the photographs, and he was there.
Yeah.
But we see Philip Matthew playing, and then behind is the blackboard at Fort 7, and you can see there's look at Dick, look at play ball. So there's obviously children are learning English there. So there's a school there.
Yeah, happening
which
right
is
in
interesting.
the community. And then even too, you talk about just as a quick aside about the Wabano ceremony in Medewan Lodge. During this process, we had to remove some of those images.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
took, yeah. Bonnie Devine, who is a very knowledgeable knowledge keeper, and I forget Bonnie's position with McMichael. Well, is there a title?
Oh, no, just long. She was a editor, longtime collaborator, one of the primary voices on early days.
Yeah.
But yeah, just our good friend, our collaborator. Yeah.
So when people are going through these photos, there are a couple of photos of a water drum, which are used in the ceremony, and it's something it's kind of one of those ceremonial items that you normally don't see photos of. So there were a couple of photos that were taken out of the exhibition, but the Medewan inside the lodge and all those were perfectly fine, and it was just great that John happened to be there at that time.
Yeah, to have those images.
This is Hockey Night in Canada. Moose Factory style. And this is one of the most delightful photos. I think it should be a cover of Hockey in Canada thing, because it's so universal in a way, and it's just the expanse of it. If we can stay on there for a sec. You can see these, we know the names, Charlie and Norman from Moose Factory, these boys, obviously brothers, and they fashioned their own, or their father or their uncle or someone has fashioned their own hockey stick. So he has the hockey stick. You can see the other boy in the red has the goalie stick. You can see the two sticks that are the goalposts. And it's probably a frozen piece of ice or something. That's the puck. And behind them, there's this juxtaposition, because you can see the fur trade was very viable and alive at this time. And that's what John was doing. It was a big job. It wasn't, there were a lot of people who were trapping at that time. So behind the boys playing hockey is this other lifestyle, which has been going on for hundreds of years, since the early 1600s, of the beaver pelts being stretched to dry, and you can see them behind, those circular beaver pelts. And of course, the beaver pelts, couple centuries before were height of fashion in Europe. Everyone had beaver hats, and that was the whole fur trade was beaver mostly. So it's just this neat layer of the history of this region, and also the sport and the hockey. So there's like this playful side to it, and then there's this historical reminder. Oh yeah, this isn't Newfoundland. These people have been here for centuries, and the connection between, the Scottish traders and who would come in through the Hudson's Bay Company, or before that, through the Northwest Company. That's also a really strong relationship. And a couple of people have asked, is there an issue, not here, but on CBC or somewhere, is there an issue with curating an outside gaze, like a non-native photographer? And I said, listen, these connections go back a long time, and John Macfie is a manifestation of one of these connections. So no, I see it very much as a holistic experience overall, and I think that's also in this photo itself.
Yeah, we were able to talk about that a little bit at the book opening, because there were 2 other contemporary Indigenous photographers on site. Yeah. And it was good because we talk about, like, a lot of times when you have photos of your family from 2-3 generations back, the only photos you're going to have are from photographers like John Macfie, people that happen to have cameras that came into the community. So I think we're maybe coming into a little bit of getting close to question period. Are you feeling like you've said what you'd like to say? I'm feeling like people have listened to me long enough.
So please take it.
All right. I've been flagged that it's time for us to take some questions. I think I maybe saw some hands going up during the discussion.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Well, okay, this works. Sorry, we arrived a little bit late, but there are a number of us here from Parry Sound.
Oh, wonderful.
And we knew John Macfie, and some of us incredibly well and had conversations with him about his time up north. And one thing that I would like to say, when you talk about the winter scenes, and you look at those photographs, how beautiful and calm and peaceful they are. And he said that he was very blessed to have been up there at a time just before snowmobiles arrived. And people were actually getting around just the way they had done for thousands of years before. And so that's just one thing. Also, John Macfie was he was a very good amateur painter. And he has also painted some very nice scenes and portraits from the time that he was up there. So John Macfie talked a lot about his times. He kept many connections, and he had people from all over the world coming to talk to him and learn from him, including the author of the book, The People of the Watershed, who was doing his PhD, and John helped him on that. So he was the most articulate person and just the greatest person to have done something like this when he got up there so early. So I just wanted to say that on his behalf.
Thank you for saying that, and also thank you for coming all the way from Parry Sound, everyone who came from Parry Sound. I've been coming every day this week from Toronto, and that seems to me enough of a trek. So, I can imagine Parry Sound's a little bit further away. And thank you for sharing that about John Macfie's comments. And this is the other thing, we're seeing his photography, but John was also a prolific writer. How many books did he write, Elizabeth? Do you know that? 13 books? Oh, 13 books, thank you. So, we're talking about, and on various subjects. The one that was given to me by the family is on logging. And it's the same thing. John just had this interest in people. And there's a beautiful photo on the back of him talking to someone who he's interviewing. And you can just see that engaging spirit that he had. So thank you for bringing that up.
Way back there.
Hi, I got a question, please, Paul.
Sure.
Yeah, my name's Bruce Cook, and my mother was a sister of John Macfie. To us, he was our Uncle Jack.
Wonderful.
But I just wanted to say thank you for casting light on the fact that not everything was bad from the residential schools. That's all we hear. And you were able to touch on the fact that, for example, your mother, she had a good outcome, there was happiness and joy in the community, so I wanted to just say thank you for saying that it wasn't all bad.
I appreciate that. I don't want to minimize, things that happen at schools, but I appreciate what you said. And yes, my mom, became a nurse out of that, and other people that I respect and know also got education. Thompson Highway, certainly has done quite well for himself, as well. So it is, I think there's many nuances, and what I really am attracted to is how John was able to capture, I think, very respectfully, the beauty of the land and of the people of that land.
Yeah, I would just say it would be more of a, in spite of residential schools rather than ever thanks to residential schools, which still fundamentally operated to sever the connection between children and their family and culture. Well, I would like to say thank you so much for Paul, for being here, for sharing your years of research and care. You've been able to, it's amazing if you get a chance to read Paul's books, Blanket Tossed Under the Midnight Sun, People of the Watershed, which is now associated, and it's got wonderful text from Paul. All these images are available. You can come talk to Paul later, hear a little bit more about what you have to say. But I honestly just want to say I'm so honored to have been able to learn from you. And I love people, I love archives, and you've been able to animate it, bring it to life. You've been such a vector and a carrier of the stories of these people that we get to see in the images, and also of John himself, who was able to record this time in these very special places. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for coming out.